Hello everyone, in this video I am going to explain the age of Chaucer. We start from 1340 to 400. Chaucer was also a great writer. His birth date is 1343 to 1400. Chaucer was the only prominent writer in his age. This is the reason we call it Age of Chaucer. Because Chaucer is the first story writer, he is known as grandfather of English novel, first modern writer and the first reformer and the first writer of Renaissance, while Wycliffe is the first reformer in religious things, while the first reformer in Renaissance is Chaucer. So let's talk about some detail of age of Chaucer, what is happened in it. Anglo-Saxons and Anglo-Normans had already influenced English culture before the age of Chaucer. A sudden plague of 1348, also called Black Death, a plague appeared and it killed around 33 population of England. Because of this great plague in 1348, England lost 33% lives, which were mostly from the rural class or the labor class. All of a sudden, labor class totally collapsed and the demand of remaining labor got raised. The demand was hiked, and for the first time the laborers they hiked their prices and they got lot of money, and this is how they become the part of the mainstream of society. After this, they realized that there were the lots of vices in society and in religion. Religion has been used as a tool to make a lot of money by lots of fake clergies. Chaucer's age is also called the age of transition. Transition is when you move to another without leaving the first one. In Chaucer's age, which is called as first transitional age, and Chaucer is called the first transitional poet. There are five transitions which are came before Chaucer. The writers of Anglo-Saxons and Anglo-Normans they are fond of using decasyllabic couplet, which was quite similar to prose style. But in Chaucer's age, the writers started preferring verse form, means poetry form. So the first transition is prose to poetry, and second is in Anglo-Saxon, the writers were fond of describing everything in detailed analysis. But in Chaucer's timing, the writers started focusing on the narration. So the another transition is descriptive literature to narrative literature. Descriptive literature, that simple means, for example, when you give a lot of narration about something which is not important. So the Anglo-Saxons were fond of using descriptions. For example, if they introduced a hero, they would take 300 to 400 lines talking about the introduction of hero, his shield, his horse, sword, bravery, eyes, arms, etc. In short, the hero's entry would take 300 to 400 lines. This was the descriptive method. But in Chaucer's age, lot of writers started following the narrative style. Instead of giving unnecessary description, they started dealing with the stories and with the content. Every third, fourth, fifth line, they would have the story to go on. They had a plot. So the third transition is idealistic literature to realistic literature. In Anglo-Saxon, people were not aware, not concerned about the vices of society. All they were concerned about idealism. So most of the time they were writing the stories of great princes, the warriors and fairies. They were talking about the idealism in every sector. Ideal father, ideal mother, ideal king, queen, ideal warriors, etc. etc. But in Chaucer's age, the writers took a very realistic approach and they started pointing out the vices of society. For example, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales have a lot of characters from the different sectors of society, and Chaucer has pointed out their vices. There are other writers like William Langland, John Grover, Wycliffe have pointed out the vices of society. This is the third transition. Fourth transition is local to standard dialect. Anglo-Saxons and Anglo-Normans were divided in lots of tribes. They had their local dialects. They would write in their local dialects. But for the first time in the age of Chaucer, they started using a standard language. Standard language which had a big area. Standard language were French, Latin, and English. There is a big change which is called the fifth transition. The fifth transition is the transition from French and Latin language to English. In Chaucer's age, most of the writers of England started writing in English. Earlier, they were writing in French and Latin. The first transition is prose to poetry. The second transition is descriptive literature to narrative literature. The third transition is idealistic literature to realistic literature. And the fourth transition is local to standard dialect. The fifth transition is from French and Latin language to English. Local dialect was not that famous in the age of Chaucer. Many other writers, allegories, comedies, novels were also popular in this age. For example, Dante's Divine Comedy. Allegory is written in a dialect Tuscan. Tuscan is a border language of Italian delimitation border, and Dante's greatest Divine Comedy is allegory written in a dialect. This is the other reason that helped Chaucer's age to be the first modern age. This was a time when England and France was the most powerful nation, have regular fights, regular wars, and here a famous battle comes, a war which is called a 100-year war, which start in 1337 to 1453. It was the regular war between England and France when most of the time England was defeated by France army, but there are three famous battles where England managed to defeat France. The first battle is the Battle of Prose, which is in 1346. Next one is Battle of Palfreys, which is from 1356, and the next is Battle of Agincourt. It is in 1415. When England defeated France, a spirit of nationality prevailed in the society. They realized they can live as a free nation. There is no need to follow French culture, tradition, language, and literature. So, this was the reason that winning these battles, English people got lot of confidence. They filled with enthusiasm and they started demanding their own language because they don't have their own language. All they had the old dialect, old English, which was heavily influenced by normal French and Latin. Here, Geoffrey Chaucer, as a settled poet at the time, he became a national poet. He took this charge to introduce a new language at the time. He had four languages in front of him, four dialects to be chosen as an option to be converted into English language. The first language he had Northumbrian, another language he had Southumbrian, third language he had East Midland, and the fourth language he have is American Old Long. Chaucer select East Midland language and made some flexible changes, introduced some grammatical things, and finally introduced a language which is called English. English becomes the language of the court in 1362. Edward III made it. English became the language of the parliament in 1363. English replaced French from school syllabus in 1386. East Midland was a dialect that covered maximum area of England. It was spoken by maximum of majority. It was the language of Chaucer and his ancestors. Chaucer was quite competent using this language. This was the time that religious authorities they would sell pardon to everyone, saying that if you buy or pay a certain amount, we will provide you pardon. The pardon has been given to you by God. These church authorities they started making a lot of money by selling pardon. This is the reason when Black Death appeared and a lot of people died. People started distrusting and doubting the religion. Their faith was in doubt because they started questioning. For example, people said that we have taken pardon, you brought some pardon to us, we paid money and took pardon, so why we people are getting killed? This was the time a famous writer, first reformer, first writer of Reformation, Wycliffe, came with his translation of Bible. John Wycliffe is the first man to translate the Bible into English. He translated Old Testament and text was written in Latin language. It is also called Wycliffe's Bible. Chaucer has been famously called the father of English poetry by Dryden. Dryden praised Chaucer's art of characterization by saying, "Here is God's plenty." It is said for Canterbury Tales. Matthew Arnold said for Chaucer that Chaucer lacks high seriousness. According to Arnold, when a poet is dealing with a serious subject, his tone should be very serious. But Chaucer's tone is not serious because he has used the mock style. He has made fun of lot of characters, so he is not serious. Though Chaucer is dealing with the vices of society, he is doing the job of a poet, but still he is not serious with his content. This is the reason he lacks high seriousness. It is with him that a real poetry is born. It is said by Arnold for Chaucer. Spencer also wrote some lines. Chaucer is the well of English, under Phil, he is the purest English poet ever. A.C. Ford has famously said for Chaucer that Chaucer's characters are individual as well as their types. He means to say that in Canterbury Tales there are lot of characters have been used. They are not only individual but they represent their types also. For example, when Chaucer talks about nun priors, they represent all the corrupt nun of that society. But when Chaucer says that nun priors had a nasal voice, she would speak using her nose, then here nun becomes an individual. Thus, Chaucer is not representing everyone but is talking about some individual characters also. Spencer praised him for purest writer in English. Chaucer has been called the Prince of Plagiarism. In book 2, it opens book 2 of Canterbury Tales. It opens with the eagle who picks the poet in his claws and gives him the lecture. The poem has autobiographical passages, and Eagle takes him to the House of Fame, where he lectures him about unhappy man. It is written in octosyllabic couplet. It invokes the god of sign and light. It imitates the look of style as Dante's Paradiso. It starts from the picture of a poet who is suffering from insomnia. He is reading the story of Kikes and Alkine. The book is full of natural charm and freshness, but the repetition of words, verbs, and new words made it gritty. There is quotation from Hudson. Chaucer shows that truth to life and impatience of artificiality, which are to become two most striking features of his writing. Under the Italian phase, Chaucer talks about Italian Renaissance, where Petrarch is called the father of Italian Renaissance and the humanism, and Dante is called the last representative of Italian Renaissance. His famous other novel is House of Fame. It is inspired by Dante's Divine Commedia. Commedia word is attributed by Bocco. Here, the book 1 opens with the discussion of dream, by which poet finds himself in a glass temple and graving story of Virgil and it. It is written on walls with special emphasis on Queen Dido's episode. Story of Ennia's marriage with Lavinia. It is also the part of book 1. This poem has been famously called Dante's in English. It is by Lydgate. The orientation of modern England in Elizabethan comes from Bible. Here the Black Death occurred in 1348, 1362 and 1367 and 1370. So that is the brief introduction about the age of Chaucer. After that we will discuss Chaucer as a writer. So wait until the next video come. Thank you so much.